book, you were talking about how if you buy a potted plant, it's not always the smartest idea to just take it out of the pot, stick it in the ground. Sometimes you actually want to cut the root tips off.
Yeah,
Can you explain why a gardener would want to do that?
sure. So the problem we have with potted plants is that they're usually root bound, right? And what that means is that the roots have grown out and reached the edge of the pot, and now they can't go any further. So they start circling around. Now, if you buy a plant and it's been treated properly in the nursery, you'd never see this. But the reality is that you do see it a lot. So now you've got these roots going around and around the just on the inside of the pot. When you take the plant out, you see them going around and around.
Yes.
And if you put that in the soil, they will continue to go around and around. They will tend to stay clumped together. They're not designed to go out in the soil. Now, eventually they will, but they may just go around and around for a while. So people came up with different ways of solving this, and there's a couple different ways. A lot of people will just slice the root ball. So you actually cut through all those roots. Just maybe an inch deep, 4 cuts, vertical cuts, and that's enough to make the roots start growing out. But when they actually looked at this scientifically, see, this goes back to the first question we asked, is what is the best way to do this? Because some gardeners, don't cut them. Some people slice them. Some people cut the bottoms off. Some people cut them into cubes and so on. So which is the best way? The only way you can tell is to actually compare them in a scientific study with proper controls and proper measurement of plants. And someone has done this.
Yes.
And it turns out the best way to do this is actually to box cut them. So you cut down the 2 sides and then the other 2 sides. So you basically make 4 vertical cuts.
Right.
You can cut the bottom off as well. So you basically cut all those roots off except what's in the very center.
Right.
And then they will start to regrow and will grow out into the new soil.
Huh.
Now, this is more important for trees than it is for perennial plants. And the reason is that trees keep those roots for their entire life. So these circulating roots don't die off, they stay there, but they get bigger and bigger and bigger. And so they will strangle the trunk of a tree eventually.
Right.
Perennials, on the other hand, tend to get rid of their old roots and replace them with new roots. So it's less of an issue there. But even perennials will grow better if you cut those roots.
Right. I should ask you, since I got you here, because this is something I think a lot of gardeners might not know. Like I've planted different apple trees in my garden. I've gotten ones from like the hardware store that are, it's like 6 foot high. It's basically a tree, and you're like, hey, that's what I want. I want a tree, and it's in a big pot, and you stick it in the ground, and then it, almost dies or whatever, or maybe it thrives, right? And then a couple of years ago, I got a bare root. What's that called? The short a whip.
That whip.
Yeah. A bare rooted whip from show sponsor Vessi Seeds. Stuck that in the ground. So I took that thing out of the box. I was like, what the hell is this? It was like a stick with roots on it and no soil and no nothing. It looked dead, right?
Yeah.
And I looked at a whole bunch of different resources and how to plant it. I did it the way that the thing said. And lo and behold, the thing grew so well, so fast, so vigorously. Yeah. And I'm wondering, is it a better way to go? They're also cheaper, right? And you think you're behind the 8 ball because the thing's only about 2 feet high when you stick it in the ground, but it's so healthy. What's the advantage of a whip, or is there an advantage? Maybe I'm just terrible at planting full-size trees, and whips are easier.
No, there actually is a big advantage. One of the problems with these full-size trees is that the top part's full-size, but the thing in the pot is really tiny in relation to the top, right?
Yes.
And so the root growth is really bad on those things. So what you find is that when you plant large ones and little ones, the large one, of course, has a head start. It's taller, it's bigger. but then it goes into sort of a hibernation thing until it can grow a good root system. So it
Right.
doesn't grow very much for 2 or 3 years. In the meantime, the little guys has the right proportion of top and bottom, both start growing. And usually within about 6 years, it's caught up to the big one. And after that, it generally grows better than the large one.
Oh, yeah.
So they are cheaper, they're easier to plant, and in the long run, it's a better choice.
Yeah.
Okay, for any kind of tree, really. Buying larger trees is not really a good thing. Most people would be better off if the nurseries only sold tiny little trees.
Right.
The problem is nobody would buy them.
I know they want, like, I want an instant tree, yeah.
So they sell the big ones. But if you have a choice, always pick the small one. It will be tinier for a few years, but 4, 5, 6 years, it'll catch up.
Yeah. Okay, here's another thing. I mean, we're getting into the, garden myth thing, but this has to be asked because we're talking about roots. And I don't even think, I can't remember if you discussed this or not. Bone meal, because every time I talk to someone, they say, oh, because, I work in a big office and people know I'm a garden guy, and they'll say, oh, I'm planting this. Should I put some bone meal in there? And I'm like, no. But everyone asks me, like, it's like everyone believes in bone meal.
Yeah.
So why? I mean, you've said this before on my show, but why is it not worth your while to put bone meal? And in what instance might it be worth your while?
Again, we come back to this business of do you listen to the gardening guys or do you listen to science, right? And I always like going back to the science. And if you listen to the gardening guys, yeah, they'll tell you put bone meals in, particularly you're planting bulbs, you got to put bone meal in and so on. So go back to the science. First question is, what is bone meal? Well, there's some calcium in there and there's a fair amount of phosphorus, considering if you compare bone meal to other things, there's a high level of phosphorus. Right. So those are the 2 nutrients you're adding. So the next question is, does my soil need either of those 2? Okay, if the answer is no, then bone meal is not going to do you any good, right? Unless you have either a calcium deficiency or a phosphorus deficiency, bone meal does not help. And that gets to one of these other things that I think gardeners really have to start understanding is that you don't fertilize plants, you don't feed plants. What we do is we replace the missing nutrients in soil. And once you understand that concept, it changes a lot of things in gardening. So the question is your soil deficient in phosphorus? Now, if it is, then bone meal will add phosphorus, right? If it's deficient in calcium, which is very rare, it will add calcium. But unless you have those 2 deficiencies, there's no point in adding bone meal. Now, with bulbs, there's a second problem in that it also attracts rodents and dogs and so on, and they tend to dig up where you just planted your bulbs. So that's a good reason not to put it there, even if you do need phosphorus.
Right.
So we have to come back and understand why we're adding this stuff. And I think once you do that, it makes so much sense to you that you wouldn't add that. I mean, I've never used bone meal in my life.
Right.
You don't need it, not around here. We have phosphorus and calcium in our soil.
Right.
And in fact, most soil has lots of phosphorus. I mean, that's another whole program, but understanding why plants may not be able to get enough of it is a different question. But soil rarely has a phosphorus deficiency. And too much phosphorus can be harmful to your plants and your soil. So, get rid of the bone meal. I mean, you don't need it.
Right. Okay, well, you sold me. I mean, that was already, I'm so cheap, I never bought it in the first place. I thought, well, how about I just plant it and see what happens? But I might have been one of those people, if I was always planting stuff and they didn't do well, would think it was bone meal when it could be 1,000 other things, like the soil's too wet or whatever, right?
Well, that's where these stories come from, right? If you've always used bone meal when you planted things and you've always had a great garden, you believe in bone meal.
Yes.
Right? But as a gardener, you've never actually tested it. You've never had 2 gardens, one with and one without. So you have no reason to believe it's bone meal.
Yes, exactly. Hey folks, want to help support everything I'm doing here? Check out my sponsors, Vessey's Seeds and Safer's Gardening Products. For Vessey's, go to their website, vesseys.com, and use my coupon code GAVS23, and you'll get free shipping as long as there's a pack of seeds in your order, and there's no oversized items in your order. Check out the description box of this video for details. For Safer's products and Woodstream products, you can buy all the things I use in my garden, slugget, snail killer, BTK, and all. You can buy that from Vessey's, or you can go to their websites for a much wider range of products to solve just about any kind of problem that you can imagine with high quality natural ingredients like oils from seeds and flowers and stuff like that. If you're in Canada, go to woodstreambrands.ca, and as long as your order is over $69, you get free shipping. If you're in the United States of America, then go to saferbrand.com, and as long as your order is over $45 US, you'll get free shipping from them. So yeah, if you want to help support the channel and the podcast, and they sell something you need, buy from them, and that'll help support everything I'm doing here. Thanks a lot.